The oldest and strongest human emotion is fear. And the oldest and strongest type of fear is trepidation of the unknown. When we were children, our parents told us that monsters didn't exist. But we were sure that something was lurking under the bed or in the closet. Fear sees, even if our eyes are closed. Welcome to the realm of the arcane. My name is Lon Strickler. Join me as I examine unexplained creatures, strange manifestations, and remarkable realities. Imagine this next hour as a voyage of discovery to strange lands, seeking not for new territory, but for new knowledge of the supernatural. Come on board as we begin this adventure together. Folks, good evening and welcome to another episode of Arcane Radio, where we explore the unexplained live on Beyond Explanation. I'm your host, Lon Strickler, coming to you within a cannon shot of the hallowed fields of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Thanks for joining us. Now, Arcane Radio and Beyond Explanation channel are made possible by you liking, subscribing, and sharing our programming. Super chat donations are essential for us to continue offering you our unique content. Your consideration is very much needed and appreciated. Now, this week, I wanted to present a very special tribute to our friend and colleague, the late crypto investigator, J.C. Johnson. From Crypto Four Corners to other cases throughout the country, we will discuss many of our fond remembrances of J.C., his theories, and the cases that he investigated. And also the folks in the chat, if you have questions, go ahead and post it up there in caps, and we'll try to answer it as we go. So folks, then thanks again for joining me this evening. And we have with us Summer Lowry, and I think later on, Eric ALTMAN from Beyond the Edge, who I used to work with on that channel for that show years ago. So thanks for coming on, Summer. How you doing?
Yeah, no
there's
problem.
Eric. Eric's in with us as well.
Hey, thanks for having me, though. Yeah, I'm doing good. Doing good. All right. Yeah.
And Eric, thanks for joining me this evening. You and I, we first started talking to. And I think you had interviewed JC before I even joined with you and Sean over at Beyond the Edge.
Yeah, many years ago.
Yeah. Wasn't I on that show with them? It was JC and I.
I don't know. I think you may have been with me, but I don't know. God, how many? That's been what? That's almost 11 years ago when I started that with
so this. Long.
So, So, Summer, let me start with you and tell us how you met JC, some of the things that you're involved in, some of the fondest memories you had of him.
Sure. So, actually, I think how we met kind of just shows so much about his character. So, I'll tell you guys about that a little bit first. Try to keep that short so we can get to the good stuff. But so it was March of 2014. I'm at my best friend's house. We're watching Destination America. And of course, Monsters and Mysteries in America comes on. And I'm like naming off all the guest, the guest cryptozoologists like you, Lon, JC, and some of the other ones. And I know everything about them. And I can quote word for word what they're going to say because I watched it so much. My friend's like, you seriously need to be a cryptozoologist. This is insane. And I'm like, yeah, right. You can't do that. It's not like I can go to school for it, And he goes, I dare you to message all these people on here. And I guarantee you they'll respond. I'm like, we literally had a bet going. So the first person I messaged was JC. And I think all I said was, I would love to pick your brain. I saw you on Monsters and Mysteries in America. And that was it. And literally, before I could even look for anybody else, he had already messaged me and was like, oh, absolutely. Would it be okay if, I called you? Because it's so much easier. And I'm like, I was just shocked, in utter shock. Are you kidding me? This can't be real. No, it was real. And it went from there. So that was March, right? By what month was that? No, I'm sorry, that was January of 2014. By March, I was already in New Mexico working with C4C. That's just crazy. I mean, he came through. I had nothing. He worked his butt off doing whatever roofing or whatever he could do to get me down there. Bought me boots. He had surprises for me. He bought me a knife and boots, and it was just the sweetest thing ever. Like, he was just such a good guy that, I don't know. It's hard to wrap your brain around. You see someone on TV and then they're so responsive. It's just crazy. But yeah, that's how I met him. I won that bet, or I lost that bet. I'm sorry. Lost it.
Well,
hands down.
Eric, now you and I have interviewed JC. I know you interviewed him before. What are your fondest memories of JC?
Oh my gosh, Lon. The stories that he would share with us, the cases, the dinosaurs that he was chasing,
Yeah,
the hairy creatures, the night stalkers. Oh, so many fantastic stories and cases that he worked on. He shared with us on the show. And one thing I really loved about JC, like you and I, we always chatted. We always got along really well. He was like part of the family. He had a name. He called me Brother Man whenever he talked to me. He'd say, "Eric, Brother Man, how are you?" And he was just an amazing human being. And yeah, I really miss him. I miss his stories. I miss chatting with him. He just had so much information. He was willing to share so freely with anybody who would want to hear it. And I think you and I were really blessed to have him on the show.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think he opened up a lot of avenues for crypto investigators, and of course, you were more involved with what was going on in Pennsylvania, especially with Bigfoot. But the stories that he had, the furry ones, and some of the anomalies in the Dene Navajo reservation area and up in the Four Corners were pretty fascinating. I actually first met him online. I gave him a phone call. This was I think it was June of 2010. He had put a video up on YouTube about him in a plane. He was actually one of the puddle jumpers flying over the reservation. He was pointing out areas where he had encounters and things he had seen. And it was interesting the fact that he was pointing all this stuff out. And I'm thinking to myself, I never heard of this guy. I don't know who the hell he is, but I got to talk to him. And that's what I did. And I actually was able to get his phone number, and I called him on the phone. And we talked for hours. And I told him that, I had been doing the blog, and that, I thought what he was investigating was just fascinating. And it so happened that he said, there's some cases I'm working on now. In particular, we have collected some samples of Bigfoot samples, and we're actually talking about getting involved in the Kitchum DNA study. I mean, that was even known back then that this was going to start. So he asked me, he said, "Would you mind documenting some of my cases on your blog?" And I said, "Absolutely." And that's how I got to know JC. It was amazing. And he taught me so much. I think he probably taught me more about cryptozoology and about the unknown than anybody else. I've been doing this for a long time. I've been doing this since, back since the 70s. And yeah, it's he was so down to earth, so personable, and I consider him my mentor. So,
Yeah.
Summer, what else you got to talk about? What kind of things did you and JC get involved with?
So, we got right to it really when I got down there.
Yeah.
It was really a blast. I was unfortunately only there for about 4 months working with him. We went on about 4 expeditions. I was horribly, horribly homesick. It was bad. And JC was always so nice about it and, comforting and stuff, but I just couldn't do it at the end. I had to go. I just wasn't feeling, I don't know. Certain places I feel like geographically, like our human spirit doesn't really like it there, and mine did not. And then for whatever reason, I wanted to be there. But anyway, my favorite story, my favorite encounter with JC is we went out to Jacob Chavez place, what's it called? Majestic Fly Fishing on the San Juan.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you've heard of it. It's beautiful there.
Mm-hmm.
And so there, to get to the rock paintings across the river from where the campsite is, you have to traverse the river. There's no other way across on his property,
Right.
but to canoe over. Mind you, it is, again, it's March. The river is freezing cold. It's moving fast and it's high.
Yeah.
And so, I was nervous. I had never been in a kayak before. And, JC, he was an expert.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't go. It was me and another girl. Her name is Summer. She was with us. She was actually our neighbor. And she was a cool chick. And so she was badass. She's like, oh, hell yeah. I've kayaked hundreds of times. And I'm like, I literally don't even know how to get in. Like, what am I doing? Anyway, she's like, I'll go first and you can go right after me. So of course, JC had already told me all about the kayaks and the canoes and stuff, and told me how to deal with them. And the one thing that was ringing in my ears the whole time was, don't lose the boat. He's like, tie that boat to your life. Right. So I did. Well, I didn't know that this river looked way deeper than it was. I had never been there. I didn't know that it was only like waist deep in the middle. Well, she goes across, just gets it, like nails it, just beautifully, right? You had to like go to the right against the current, upstream a little bit and like kind of swing around to make it across, to be able to go fast enough, because it's moving quick. And oh my goodness, this is embarrassing. She gets off and she's like, come on, you're good. And I try to do what she does and I epically fail. I get all the way to, I'm just a few feet from the other shore. And I start to turn. My canoe starts to go backwards into the rapids. And so, I try to correct myself. Well, I overcorrect and my oar gets stuck in the rocks and I flip right over.
No.
I'm swimming now. And I pop my head up and I promise you, all I could hear was JC screaming from the campsite, don't you lose that boat. You don't lose that boat. And I'm just like, I'm thinking, at this point, I realize I can sit in the water and I'm my head's above it. It's not that serious.
Mm-hmm.
But at first I'm like, really? The boat, JC? Anyway, it was adorable because he knew I would be fine. I didn't know I would be fine. I'm thinking I'm dead. Here we go. It's over. I'm drowning. Anyway, that was a fun day. So I was too afraid to go back across, but the only way across is to go. So I made JC walk over through the freezing river to bring me waders because I wasn't doing it. I'm like, I'm never getting in a kayak again. I haven't to this day. Nope. Needless to say that the paintings were beautiful once I got there.
Absolutely. Yeah. The petroglyphs on along the San Juan are really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And that river was, he knew that river like the back of his hand. And some of the stories that he had coming out of there, some of the sightings, some of the furry one encounters he had from the cliffs above the San Juan, and some of the other stuff that he had talked about. I mean, they were just fascinating stories, fascinating accounts, and I never met JC in person, and I always promised that I was going to come down there. And because I was a fly fisherman, and I was just begging to go out and say I want to go fishing out there. But that's probably the biggest regret I have, that I never met him in person. Now, Eric, what other accounts you want to bring up about JC?
I remember this is going back to 2008 with the Sasquatch in the freezer fiasco going on, and JC was embroiled in the middle of that. And I remember distinctly seeing the news shows, the coverage, seeing JC pulling out all those roadkill remains and dead carcasses from the freezer that Biscardi had instructed him to do. And I kept thinking in the back of my mind, man, JC, you are so much above this. Why are you doing this? And I always have visions in my head of JC doing that, just reaching in with his arms and pulling off these big chunks of meat from that costume.
I do too. I can't get that out of my head. Like, why? Stop. No.
Yeah, I can never figure out why he was running around with Biscardi in the first place. But yeah, that always sticks with me, is seeing JC doing that, and why he agreed to do that, I'll never know.
Well, I tell you, that whole fiasco, I could do a couple shows on that, be honest with you. I don't even want to go back and talk about that. But that was probably one of the biggest embarrassing moments in cryptozoology, especially here in the United States.
Oh, without a doubt.
That was just terrible. I mean, for Bigfoot investigators and researchers, it was sacrilege. And, you're right. A lot of people got caught up in that. And, I think that's a shame why Sean isn't here tonight, because Sean could really talk about that, because he knew some of the characters involved. So, yeah. But anyway, we're here to talk about JC. I think the first case that I got involved with JC or documented for JC was at Fruitland, where he had actually started collecting this Bigfoot DNA. And he had a few theories about what was going on. It's interesting. There was a PVC pipe that, and I think you know what I'm talking about. It was when they found this PVC pipe that had a big hole in the top of it, and apparently a Bigfoot had tried to get a trapped skunk out of there.
Yep.
In order to retrieve the glands from this skunk to use as some type of scent camouflage or scent covering for a young furry one. I mean, that was JC's theory. It was an interesting theory. But in the meantime, there was Bigfoot blood and tissue that was retrieved from that PVC pipe that had cut itself when it went in their antler. And that was some of the main evidence that he had for the Ketchum study. That alone fascinated me. That was the first thing I'd ever ever documented from him. And not long after that, he had been talking about the furry ones up in Lukachuka, was up in the mountains. Him and Leonard Dan were up there, and a few others. In fact, I think David Weatherly was with them that time. But I remember David was talking about when they were up there that they had a few aggressive furry ones throwing stones and pine cones at them while they were in the campsite. It was pretty harrowing from what David was telling me.
And they threw a tree trunk at them.
Did it? I don't doubt it. Yeah.
I remember David on our show telling him they threw a tree trunk at the vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know anything about this summer?
Yeah, I do. I have been to Fruitland. It's obviously not in this. It's not in this. We can't tell you exactly where it's at because it's top secret, as you know. But it's a place we called it the Wastelands. As far as the Fruitland goes, and then Lukachuka is just wild. I don't even.
Yeah, that's up in Apache County. That's up in Arizona, but it's up in the Highlands. Yeah. Yeah,
really high up there. No, but the Fruitland area expedition we had went on. That one was weird for me. We found some really awesome, what looked like some kind of feline prints that were quite irregular. There's pictures of them in one of JC's albums, actually on both of our Facebooks, under the Wastelands trip, if anybody wants to look. There was like a canopy of these just dead trees, like huge canopy. And so we camped under that. We got our tents and stuff. We all had our own tent, and there was about 5 of us. And I was closest to the river. The San Juan ran directly behind, just a few hundred feet away from camp. And so initially I was just going to be sleeping by myself. Well, I kept hearing these, I don't even know. I think it was, it was like whooping, howling noises that weren't It wasn't, I know animal sounds. It wasn't a dog, it wasn't a cat. It wasn't a bear. It was, you know what I mean? It wasn't javelina. And javelina really were the only things, and coyotes, that should have even been out there, period, because it was so far into the desert. I mean, it was literally, I was so far away from civilization, it scared me a little bit. And that's hard to do. I love being out like that. But it was the farthest I've ever been away from any animal. You don't see birds, nothing. Anyway, he's like, just, be aware of the javelina at night, because they can get a little aggressive and stuff. So if you hear them, he said they should be on the other side of the river right now, because it's that time of year, I guess. He's so smart when it comes to that. I was like, okay. But I'm hearing it. I'm hearing these noises. And at first I'm like, okay, there was some coyotes across the way, and I could identify that. And then a few hours later, it's late. It's like midnight, and we are all sleeping, trying to sleep. And I keep hearing this noise, and I'm just like, it literally sounded like it was on this side of the river, just right behind me. And I'm like, I don't like it. I don't like this. So I kept waking the guys up, and I'm like, JC, do you hear that? And he's like, no, I don't hear. Nobody heard it. Nobody heard it but me. And nobody wanted to come into my tent. And I was like, I ended up sleeping with the gun under my pillow and Summer's chihuahua next to me, a chihuahua, mind you. I don't know what he was going to do, but, because I figured that if they smell a dog, whatever it is won't bother me, which thank God they didn't. And I finally got sleep, but just those sounds, I don't know. It was odd. I wish I would have had something at the time to record it,
right.
But just, you're so far out there, you don't, we're out there looking for prints and tracks and samples. We weren't really, planning on doing any filming or audio recording, but I know now to be more prepared, because that was insane.
There was also a case that I remember. Now, it was an area out in Hogback in New Mexico. It was on the reservation, where JC had actually started back in March of 2010 investigating the mutilation of 24 sheep out there on this farm. And actually, when he was there, the owner was telling him that there were large talon marks, but very little blood on these sheep. No evisceration, nothing. The blood was just missing. And they were trying to figure out what it was. And JC's theory was that it was a large flying predator, possibly a pterosaur type. And look, there have been pterosaur sightings out there on the reservation as well. And but they were trying to figure out why the carcass was left intact. It was very similar to the attacks that people had been describing in Puerto Rico and such, with the chupacabras and some of those other attacks. But JC was pretty sure that this thing was flying in. It's just one of the many wild cases and stuff that was going on out there. And it was always interesting, because I would be at home and working on the blog, and then a text would come up, and it's from JC. I got something for you to look at. I got something, So he'd just throw the information out at me. He'd make a video, and he always made a video. And in fact, those videos are still available. I mean, I think his daughter is allowing those videos to stay up. Some of the most fascinating stuff you'd ever want to hear. So, yeah. And look, Eric, you think of anything while we're talking, just go ahead and butt in. Tell us what you have to say.
If I might just say one thing to add to before we get too off track. So me personally, and I think I had mentioned this to JC as well, and he definitely was on board with the theory that, Lon, I know you know about the Elizabeth Lake monster. I think it, like you said, a pterosaur.
Mm-hmm.
Due to the geographic location, where each of those locations are, I would not be surprised whatsoever if those are connected to the same, being. Really.
Well, he swore. He swore that he thought pterosaur type beings were on the reservation, in particular, all around the Four Corners. Of course, he was talking about the flying humanoids when, like Eric mentioned, he gave it the name of what was the name he gave it? I don't know, I forget. But it brought a lot of attention. The
Thunderbird? No.
the Night Stalker,
Yeah, the
and
Night
you know
Stalker,
that
right?
Yeah.
that was an amazing tale. I mean, and he had the evidence. I mean, he had the interviews with the girl who was involved with it and the family. Basically, that this, something similar to what we've been getting in Chicago, actually. This this winged being that was coming out of the cornfields nearby this home that was literally stalking this female member of the family, and this thing was tearing up sides of the double wide that they lived in. Some of the bumper and some of the sides of this truck that the father owned. It was just amazing stuff. And look, these cases, folks, I do have them listed on the blog. I mean, it's under the JC link on the right hand column of the blog. But I've got pictures of all the damage to the truck, to the rabbit cage where this thing actually tried to get in to kill a rabbit, along the muddy claw marks on the side of the house. And this girl that he interviewed, the daughter, actually stated that she called it something very similar to the creeper from Jeepers Creepers. And the sightings that we have got in and around the Chicago area are a lot of people are describing the same thing. Now, I don't think it's the same type of being, but who knows what it was. And her description was it was covered in gray hair, and then it had 3 clawed appendages on the hands that were very visible. The torso to head height of the being was about 5 foot sitting, which would make it approximately 8 to 9 foot in full height. There is an indication that the being had wings, which would explain the odd patches of trampled corn stalks in the field as it would fly and land indiscriminately. What do you remember from that case, Eric?
Yeah, I remember he and Leonard Dan on the show talked about that case in great detail and how they went to the farm, the property, and they found scratch marks on the air conditioning unit outside her window, like it was trying to claw its way in. And I remember him talking about the female witness and how she was scared to death of this thing coming around at night. And at first her family didn't believe her, but then they eventually heard it up on the roof of the double wide walking around, and how JC and Leonard Dan said they had actually followed tracks of this thing out into the cornfield before it flew off, and they saw a lot of evidence. So I remember that case really well. And if I'm not mistaken, that female witness actually made an episode of, I think, Monsters and Mysteries in America, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, she was on that episode, yeah.
Yeah, and that case was probably one of the most favorite I can recall of JC talking about to us on the show, because as he did describe it, it sounded a lot like that Jeepers Creepers thing, the way he described it, the way the witness described it. So very creepy stuff.
Yeah, and also the biggest reason why the girl was upset was that at night this thing seemed to have some type of ability, psychic ability, to control her. It was trying to control her to either have it come through the window or through the door, the doorway or something. But she would literally get up at night and said that she was literally controlled by this thing. It was a bizarre story. I do know that she did leave home a couple of months after and move to the nearest town, but she wanted to get away from there. But you're right. It was on that episode that was called, I don't know, something about the desert or something, but it was one of the earlier Monsters and Mysteries of America's episodes. It was kind of the year before I did my episode with the Sykesville Monster. Yeah,
he talked to us before that show aired.
Yeah,
so it was kind of neat to see who the witness was and see the actual location where it happened and everything that she talked about. I mean, it was spot on what JC told us.
Yeah, it was quite an interesting account, as were all JC's account. The furry one encounters were always interesting. there was one I remember in particular, how in the area of the Valley Caldero in New Mexico, which is a well-known area for a lot of weird stuff. There have been people who saying they've seen lichens and cougars, bears, coyotes, dogmen, hairy hominids, and extraterrestrial activity. And in fact, there was one episode where a ranching family had lost 40 head of cattle in one night. And he was called out to that location. JC seemed to think it was something to do with reported covert military activity. He wasn't really sure what it was. So, this is, for people who are not familiar with JC and some of the things that he investigated. Like I said, you go to phantomsandmonsters.com, and on the right-hand column, you'll see the Cryptid Four Corners International Investigations from J.C. Johnson. And those cases are listed there. But, and some of the people that J.C. worked with, especially at Leonard Dan and, of course, David Weatherly, we had Tom Saraccia and Kevin Puckett were on that team as well. And he had a lot of the local individuals working with, as well as the Rangers who were, involved with a lot of the things on the reservation. There was a TV presentation of the Navajo Rangers involved with an upright canine sighting on the reservation. I think you remember that, don't you, Eric?
Yeah, I had myself muted. Sorry. There was this TV show called, I believe it was called Navajo Cops,
right?
Something to that effect. And
that's what it was.
Yeah, they chased something up into a hillside, into a cave, and they caught evidence on their cameras of eye shine reflecting back from that cave. And the two officers, and I don't blame them, weren't going to go into that cave after it, but they definitely caught some kind of upright animal. I think, if I'm not mistaken, one of the officers on that ridge actually saw the thing crawl up the hill and disappear into the cave. But I remember that episode. Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, that
the
was
video. I have the video of the camera footage of it running up the hill as they kind of are chasing it with the camera. Mm-hmm. It runs up the hill and like stops kind of by a rock, and it turns, and then it sits there for a second, and then it scurries away. And then I'm assuming, I've never seen what you're talking about, the where it goes into the cave. I've seen it after. But I think I have that video in my Facebook Messenger from JC.
I think there was a section of the video where they had the eye shine coming out of the cave as well of this mm-hmm. thing. So that was pretty interesting, but just, JC just didn't cover cryptids. I mean, he got involved with some extraterrestrial activity as well. And the one case that I remember was a couple by the name of Bradford and Maria who lived up near Gallup. And they had witnessed a series of gunshots, heavy ground artillery not far from their home. They were living in a Hogan, actually. And soon afterwards, bright lights appeared from above their Hogan. And the lights were so bright that they illuminated the inside of the Hogan and through the windows and incredibly through the tiny cracks in the walls and ceiling. Caused disorientation. And when they looked out, they saw a honeycomb-shaped array coming from a craft hovering above them. And he did an incredible video, which you can get the link of. And I think you talk about Summer Schmidt, who was the girl you were talking about, Summer.
Yep. Sonar, her puppy.
And she was amazing.
Yeah, I love her. I miss her. I really do.
And the witnesses, they said they made their way towards the main house behind the Hogan. And as they were running, they noticed a saucer-shaped craft hovering over the house with multicolored lights rotating around it. And the beams were displaying from different directions and other nondescript craft. Now, these craft were creating torrents of strong wind that literally pushed the pinyon and juniper trees to the ground. And I remember seeing pictures of that from JC where they just flattened these things. He also noticed very small entities scurrying around the enclosed dogs, suddenly causing the dogs to stop barking and rendered unconscious. Now, as that story, as he got deeper into it, and some of the other investigators, he had the U-Track. He had Calvin O'John, who was a tracker that worked with JC on that case as well. And during that confrontation, one of the witnesses, Bradford, stated that his uncle literally had been battling one of these entities in his house, which was nearby. And it became apparent that the uncle either incapacitated or killed the being. And I don't know if you remember this, Eric, but JC was talking about later a gentleman that he called the universal soldier. That was his term for this guy, but it was definitely a military guy. He came in there all decked up, had all the equipment and everything with him, and he had a cryo container in the back of this SUV, and he literally went into the house, took this being's body and put it in that cryo container. And that was the evidence. That was the statements that the witnesses actually gave. I don't know if you remember that, Eric, but that case was really interesting. It later led to JC going out later on with one of his investigators, in which he had an encounter with a black-eyed female. Which left him incapacitated. Actually, JC got deathly ill from it. I think that encounter was something that stuck with him for a long time physically. I really do. I mean, JC told me for years that he thought that encounter had literally physically hurt him and continued to incapacitate him as he got older. And, I guess that came directly from him. So, I don't know what that happened during that incident, but it was really interesting. Do you remember any of that summer, him talking about that incident?
Oh yeah, that one shook him to the core. He was pretty fearless, but he would say it zapped him. It zapped him. His energy, like literally, like his essence or something, and it's funny. It was not funny, but I actually had an experience where an artifact that we were, had the, honor of going and being able to see at Leela Captain's, place out at this museum out by, Shiprock, New Mexico. It was odd, but he like attributed my ailments, the things that I was experiencing after touching this object. He was like, that's literally exactly how I remember feeling when, we encountered that black-eyed being. And it's just strange. Like you touch something, you feel it like vibration, everything has like, energy, you can feel it sometimes, and sometimes it's more intense for people. And I touched this thing, I promise you, it was like somebody gave me sleeping medication. Like I couldn't stand. He had to walk me to the truck, to Chief Dan's truck, and I had to sleep in the truck for the rest of the trip. I could not open my eyes. I was that tired. It was the weirdest thing ever, and I was like that for a few days. It was taxing. And he's like, I was like the exact same way when we encountered that being. So I don't know. Yeah.
Well, as time went on, I was documenting more and more of what JC was doing. In 2015, he got called out to a case near the San Juan River in the vicinity of the North Four Corners. And you and I both know George Harvey, and it was his homestead, which included his mother and his siblings. And I think Dr. Christopher was along with them on that. He was he worked for the anthropology department at the University of New Mexico, I think near Gallup. And this was the findings from this as well became part of the Kitchum DNA study. But anyway, George Harvey had previously chronicled the behavior of the Sasquatch for many years, one of the furry ones around his homestead. And during one particular incident, George observed an adult and two juvenile Bigfoot walk towards the mesa behind his home. Dr. Christopher noted that the face of the mesa may have been at a 45-degree angle. And George noted that the Bigfoot easily traversed the steep ascent to the top in order to gather food in nearby cornfield and orchard. And there had been many incidents of stone barrages on the property as well. So, but the most interesting part about this whole thing was an interview that Dr. Christopher had with Alex, who's George's sister. This took place on January 11th, 2015, the video. And she recalled, and the video is actually still up on JC's channel, which you can find on YouTube. But she recalled the encounter she had on January 4th, 2015, with a group of furry ones, part of a larger habituation group that migrates through the area. And I've heard that many times with several of the smallest homesteads all through the Dene Navajo reservation, where people have been talking about the furry ones just calmly traverse through their homesteads, their fields. It's like second nature to these folks. So Alex at the time was driving a four-wheeler on the homestead along with her dogs when she encountered several huge figures hiding behind the cropping of trees. It was at that point when three Bigfoot stepped out, stunning Alex since she had never encountered any of these beings previously. Her brothers had mentioned that they did exist, but she never believed the accounts. And in fact, this group of Bigfoot had been researched by JC and others in the group for approximately an 8-year period. And I do remember JC talking about these. So when Alex told her mother about the encounters, she referred to the Bigfoot as her hairy boys. So their presence was well known. Now, the interesting thing about this account was Alex's description of the largest Bigfoot was that it stood approximately 12 foot and covered in dark brown hair. JC later mentioned that the Bigfoot was known by them as Rufus. And I had heard that name before. And that they had photographs of previous encounters. Alex also said there was a 10-foot Bigfoot similar to the description as Rufus, similar in description as Rufus. The youngest member of the group stood about 8 foot and had reddish colored hair. She described that each of the faces were mostly hairless with dark brown skin, flat, narrow noses, and wide foreheads. And she also stated that Rufus had large bulbous eyes that may have been 3 inches in diameter. So this was a big boy. And as she sat on the four-wheeler, paralyzed from the shock of this encounter, she noticed that the 10-foot Bigfoot made a whistling sound. Her dog Zora approached and laid down near the youngest member of the trio. The Bigfoot remarkably reached down and rubbed Zora's ear. As it turns out, these Bigfoot had previously brought bones of kills to Zora while tied up on the homestead property at night. The young Bigfoot had also been known to draw on rocks. From the information I received from JC, there are several Bigfoot clans in the general area. Another known group includes an older female who has been seen with several juveniles over the years. At one point, she had 3 sons traveling with her. It seems that these hominids are not monogamous and that the female in particular had bred with several males in a wide migration area. So at the present time, when I took this report, photographic evidence was being suppressed. There was much more research required on the various clans within the habituation area. This is also tribal land, and in all respect to the privacy and customs of the residents must be maintained. And as far as I know, none of that evidence was ever revealed. So I don't know if you were with JC at that time. You think he may have been Summer. Do you remember any of that?
I'm sorry, what was the question? Do I remember?
Do you remember any of that account?
Not enough. Not enough. No.
Okay.
No,
Yeah,
I hate to.
I know
I
it was early 2015 when it happened. So I don't know when you were with JC.
I was there in the year before.
Okay.
Yeah. Honestly, God only knows what I was doing.
I know a lot of it was kept quiet, and
yeah.
I know that Dr. Christopher, who was involved with the Ketchum study, took the actual DNA evidence and submitted it as well. And when they had a conference about a year later, and I have it documented, the conference and everything, that evidence was presented, as well as JC was there as well for the conference, and he made his presentation. So, that whole Ketchum study, and I don't know what you think about this, Eric, because I know you're so involved with Bigfoot study and research. Do you believe that the Ketchum DNA study really offered much to any research of Bigfoot?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I think, unfortunately, a lot of the material was mishandled and probably tainted. I don't think the study was done correctly the way it should have been. And I don't think it played any real benefit to the community. And unfortunately, it became a laughingstock to the scientific community. And that's a shame, because there were some really good researchers that were involved with it.
Oh,
I agree with it. I agree with that. That's more or less what what I was told as well.
Well, I believe Dr. Brian Sykes probably had more to offer in his study, but I don't know. I don't know if he was involved at all with Ketchum. Eric, do you have an answer for that?
No, I don't believe he was.
Okay.
I think his most of his stuff came from Meldrum and a couple other sources, but nothing came from the Ketchum study, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's what I remember as well on that one.
Okay. Well, that's a shame then, because I know JC put a lot of stock into that. And you're right. I don't think it was handled correctly. It was interesting. I had done an episode of Coast to Coast back in 2016, I think it was, and I was in the second half of the show, and Melba Ketchum was actually in the first half, and I thought there was going to be some real promise there. I really did. I mean, the way she explained it to, and I think that was George Norrie who actually did the interview. In fact, I'm pretty sure it was, because he interviewed me later. But I had promise for that. But like you said, it just didn't pan out that well. And it would have been a great testament to JC's work and research and investigations if something would have come from that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And like I said, there were a few other researchers who put a lot of effort into that and collecting samples. And unfortunately, they got the black eye from it.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. And so unfortunately that didn't happen. But anyway, as not long after that, JC moved from the Four Corners area up into northern Minnesota, not far from the Ojibwe the reservation that was up there. And he lived with a gentleman by the name of Ron, who had a pretty large property in the area. And JC's son had been involved with some of the research as well. He had a few other people with him occasionally. And some of the activity that was most interesting up there was some of the upright canine activity and a little bit of Bigfoot activity, but also there was some incident of these green Pudgewucky-like beings that were being seen in the ferns and such, and there were some photographs taken of that as well. Do either of you have any comments on what happened up in Minnesota?
I honestly, Pudgewuggies are terrifying, but I think JC just like kind of was like, look, this stuff, the East Coast stuff is like not, yeah, I'm not ready for a lot of that.
Yeah.
No, but there was great stories. I just didn't really, I was more of like the Dogman person, or anything like anything on the West Coast. Yes. But I can't, anybody who, if either of you have any stories about those, they're horrifying.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, we've been looking into, Butch Witkowski and I have been looking into the Pennsylvania upright canine and Dogman, the quadrupeds, in Pennsylvania now since 2013. So, yeah, actually the case I documented was titled "The Little People of Northern Minnesota." And if you go to that link on Fams and Monsters, you will see some of the photographs that were taken. They're very interesting. I can't make out what the hell those things were, but they are interesting. They're kind of 2 to 3 foot in height for the most part, greenish complexion, and they were kind of living in the dark world of the bracken fern that canopies most of the area during the spring and summer. But that was a big investigation that JC got involved with at the time. But of course, he was more focused on the upright canine activity, and in fact, they had attempted to get a video of an encounter with one of these things. I remember in one instance, and I think Jane, and I forget Jane's last name, but she used to be with JC when they was up in Minnesota. She was on a 4-wheeler, and I think JC's son was actually driving, and one of these upright canines were tracking them as they were going through the property. This thing jumped out and was chasing them. And, from some of the audio that I heard of it, it was pretty harrowing. But they did attempt to do a video later on of an attempt to corner one of these things and get some video of it. It didn't turn out too well. There was some gunfire involved. I don't think they hit the thing. But it was, like I said, it was another harrowing video that came out of that. So, that's kind of what JC was working on up until the time he passed. And, unfortunately, JC contracted pneumonia. And, JC wasn't an old man. I think he was probably close to 60. I don't even know what his real age was. But he was in the hospital for at least over a month, and we lost him. And for me, that was just terrible. I mean, it was 2018, if I remember. And, we lost a very interesting and important researcher in our field.
Yep, you're right. It was February 2018. Mm-hmm. Never forget it. Yeah, it's unfortunate that, I feel like the older we get, we think we can just handle being sick on our own. And I think we kind of downplay that maybe maybe we need more than just whatever we're doing for ourselves at home sometimes.
Yeah.
And it can become dangerous. And this is a very good example of that.
Well, I
It's just
learned my lesson.
horrible.
I learned
Yeah,
my
me
lesson
too.
because I caught pneumonia in 2016, and I damn near bolt the farm, and I didn't realize it until I went into the hospital. And after a week's stay, and I fortunately recovered from it, but I still have physical effects from it. So yeah, it's right. You think you own the world, you can do all you want, and JC was that mentality. He didn't let anything let him down. And I don't think he realized how sick he actually was. And in fact, I remember when Ron called me and told me that JC was in the hospital, and that they didn't think he'd be there that long. And then a month later, we had lost him. And again, it was tragic. But these things happen, unfortunately, and there's not much else you can say about it. But quite frankly, I don't think anybody has really picked up the ball and continued on his research. And I don't think we're going to ever have anyone like him to do this.
I feel like my 2-year-old son I named after JC. His name is actually Johnny after JC. He might be reincarnation, because this kid, I swear, he's just a little shit. And I'm like, he'll look at me a certain way that JC would look at me when I was being, maybe not the nicest person. And he looks at me with the same look, and I'm like, it just goes right to my core. And I'm just like, don't you ever look at me like that again.
Yeah.
But it just reminds me so much of him. It's just weird. But I mean, it's wonderful to,
Yeah, I don't think I've recovered from it, actually. I mean, I think about JC all the time, especially when something will come up from an old investigation or somebody asks me about him. And he was an old standby for Arcane Radio for a long time, and of course with Beyond the Edge. So we will miss him, and we do miss him, and So, Eric, you got anything to follow up with before we close up the show?
No, just that I really enjoyed the time I had with JC, getting to know him and talk with him and share the stories. And he was one of my favorite guests on the show. We always had a great time, even when he fell asleep at the end of the show and you could hear him snoring.
Yeah, well, I didn't mention that. Oh my gosh!
Oh, he did that a lot. Yeah, he did that a lot.
We'd be talking away and asking him questions and carrying on a conversation, and there'd be silence on his end, and we both stop.
Try sleeping. Try sleeping in a tent next to that guy, in a bedroom next to him. You don't get any sleep. You learn to use headphones or something, because it's literally in the night. Oh my gosh, I can't even. We don't even need to go into that. But yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, David Woodley has mentioned the same thing to me, just sleeping in the tent beside him. And it's
like a freight train rolling by.
Yeah, every creature in the forest knew JC was asleep in the tent. That's all I can say. So, well, I want to thank you two for joining me this evening. This was a very interesting show. I've always wanted to put something out there, commemorating JC's work and his life. So, I talked, before JC passed away, he and I had talked about writing a book about his exploits, which I haven't done, and out of respect for the family, but I will put it out there. If anybody ever wants me to document it or write it, I'd be more than pleased to do so. So, Summer and Eric, I want to thank you both for joining me this evening. And,
thank you so much for having us, or having me. Yeah.
You both take care.
You too.
You too. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Now, if you have an unexplained encounter or sighting, feel free to contact me through the Phantoms of Monsters blog site. I want to again thank Summer Lowry and Eric Altman for joining me this evening. And thanks to each and all of you for watching and chatting. If you made a super chat donation, it's truly appreciated. Your support is what makes this possible. Please like, subscribe, and share. Next week's show, I be honest with you, I got in here late and didn't even remember who was going to be on, but we'll be here next week with a show. So until then, be safe, Have an enjoyable weekend, and we'll see you then.